Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, proud to support the mission of KPBS and privileged to serve San Diego clients. Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, helping homeowners maintain drain, heating, and cooling systems since 1978. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. By viewers like you. Thank you.
Good evening. It's Monday, February 7th. Thanks for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. It's called Hell Week, and it's one of the most grueling training sessions a Navy SEAL candidate will go through. Well, tonight the Navy is facing questions after the death of one candidate and the hospitalization of another. KPBS military reporter Steve Walsh reports from Coronado.
24-year-old Kyle Mullins of New Jersey was a football star in high school, later making All-Ivy League second team when he played for Yale. His coach at Monmouth University tweeted, "He will be remembered not just as an excellent player, but also an excellent person and great teammate." Mullins died early Friday evening at Scripps Hospital on Coronado. Another unnamed SEAL candidate remains hospitalized in stable condition at the Naval Hospital in San Diego. The two had just completed the grueling Hell Week. All SEAL hopefuls go through basic underwater demolition SEAL or BUDS at Coronado. Close to 80% of SEAL candidates drop out, most during Hell Week. Over 5.5 days, candidates get roughly 4 hours of sleep. They're constantly submerged in the 57-degree ocean water. They endure physical and mental anguish while their instructors dare them to quit. Mullins had only been in the Navy since March. He went to BUDS right out of Navy basic training. That's not unusual for SEALs. Many are skilled college athletes who are recruited specifically to become the Navy's elite commandos. Mullins and the other candidate finished Hell Week Friday morning. They began showing signs of distress late that afternoon and were transported in the same ambulance. Monday, Pentagon spokesman John Kirby said the Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin had been briefed on the death.
I think the Secretary wants to make sure that he gives the Navy the time to look at this carefully and thoughtfully before coming to any kind of conclusions. Obviously, one such accident is one too many. We just don't know. We just don't know what happened here.
Mullins is not the first death at BUDS. In 2016, James Lovelace drowned during a pool exercise. The medical examiner ruled his death a homicide after videotape showed an instructor dunking him. Lovelace also had an enlarged heart and charges were never brought. Around the same time, a candidate committed suicide after failing Hell Week. The Navy says the investigation into Friday's incident is underway. Steve Walsh, KPBS News.
A former San Diego County Sheriff's deputy who shot and killed a man as he was running away has been sentenced to 1 year in jail and 3 years of probation. Aaron Russell pleaded guilty to manslaughter charges last month to avoid a second-degree murder charge. In 2020, Russell shot Nicholas Bills at least 4 times after the detainee escaped from a state park's patrol car near the San Diego jail. Russell apologized to Bills' family, who were in court, but his mother said she was not ready to forgive.
This sweet, gentle soul was my son, and I loved him. I want to be heroic and forgive you, Aaron Russell, but today I just can't.
Criminal charges against the deputy came as a result of a change to a state law which holds that officers can only use deadly force to defend against the imminent threat of death or serious harm to themselves or others. Russell also faces a wrongful death lawsuit filed by Bill's mother. California lawmakers have extended COVID sick leave requirements for businesses with 25 or more employees. Workers who contract coronavirus will get up to 2 weeks of paid time off. The bill is retroactive to January 1st. The previous state law expired last September. And California's mask mandate will be lifted next week, but with one exception. State health officials announced today the mandate will end February 15th, although local cities and counties can continue their own requirements. And school children will still have to mask up for the time being. With positive cases decreasing across most of the country, other governors are announcing plans to roll back mandates. Daryl Forges has a look.
Some good news. New COVID-19 cases continue going in the right direction. According to data from Johns Hopkins University, the country is seeing a 7-day average of nearly 292,000 new cases per day. That's a 43% decrease from a week ago. And the Department of Health and Human Services reports hospitalizations are down 19%.
Because of the dramatic decline in our COVID numbers, effective Monday, March 7th, the statewide school mask mandate will be lifted.
With positive COVID numbers decreasing, governors in Delaware and New Jersey are announcing plans to roll back school mask mandates.
We are not removing the ability of individual district leaders to maintain and enforce such a policy within their schools, or any private child care provider from maintaining such a policy within their business should community conditions require.
Some health experts say this is the right move.
Yes, it may be the right thing to do at this point. We need to look community by community to see what the numbers are like.
This as a bipartisan group of governors are pushing the White House to issue guidelines to help the country move beyond the pandemic.
I think what governors are sensing is that we need to agree upon a set of metrics when we're going to start to roll back these mitigation steps and give people a light at the end of the tunnel. What is that point when this stuff gets turned off?
Daryl Forges, KPBS News.
California's indoor mask mandate was enacted to limit the spread of the virus. So how effective is it? A bit later, we'll tell you about new science that tries to answer that question. San Diego State students return to regular in-person classes today after starting the spring semester online. SDSU officials are enforcing strict protocols required by the state, and that includes wearing masks indoors, and all students and staff on campus this spring must have received their COVID booster shot and provide the documentation. COVID-19 testing remains available through vending machines across campus. Southwestern College remains mostly virtual with classes through the end of February. The college is also offering eligible students up to $2,500 in grant money to pay for school. KPBS education reporter MG Perez brings us that story.
Annabelle Ramos works at the Southwestern College bookstore to help pay for expenses. She's been a student here since before the COVID shutdown and has already earned a business administration associate degree for transfer to a 4-year university. But she's not done with this campus yet.
So the class is the rehearsal.
Annabelle is taking a theater arts class this semester, which she hopes will help her in becoming a professional singer-songwriter someday. But dreams cost money.
It was the primary thought on my mind ever since I started school. It was something that impacted how well I was able to focus on my classes, just because I was always preoccupied with that financial aspect.
She is one of the 23,000 students on the Southwestern College South Bay campuses struggling to pay for tuition and expenses. The main campus here in Chula Vista is still sparse, with most classes online through February 28th. Many students have dropped out to deal with the consequences of COVID, like a lost job or the death of a relative. The college is now offering these students up to $2,500 in federal relief grant money to keep them enrolled or to encourage their return.
The financial elements of a student considering whether or not to go back to college is critical. So we felt that by providing the financial support, we would be able to alleviate a major stressor in their decision making.
Even though classes started a week ago, eligible students will not receive the federal grant money right away. College officials want to make sure that students are committed to sticking around. So the first disbursements will happen on Valentine's Day. Kevin Stevens is also taking theater arts this semester, and he is not acting when he shares his appreciation for grant money.
It's very nice to know that you have a lot of a financial burden lifted off your hands, especially if you're someone who pays rent, if you're someone who has or just doing a part-time job, not making enough money to, support yourself.
Annabelle Ramos will keep her part-time job and the hope for her dream career on stage.
Even if education changes drastically, there's still ways to overcome that.
There is value in perseverance, too. MG Perez, KPBS News.
The city of Tijuana evicted hundreds of migrants living in a makeshift camp just south of the U.S. border. As many as 2,000 people, many of them asylum seekers, lived in the camp at one point. KPBS border reporter Gustavo Solis has the details.
The mass eviction began 4 a.m. Sunday morning. In a matter of hours, Tijuana police officers and soldiers from Mexico's National Guard cleared the migrant camp that sits just across the border from the San Isidro port of entry. By the end of the day, a tent city that had been home to thousands of asylum seekers was back to being an empty pedestrian plaza. The only hints of the people who occupied this space was a single basketball and a heart someone had painted on a nearby tree. The city gave no notice of its planned operation. Migrants simply woke up to soldiers and officers telling them they had 30 minutes to pack up and leave. They kicked us out by force, one migrant says, like we're trash. They treat us worse than animals. Another migrant says the city treated them like they're criminals. He says you'd think they were arresting El Chapo with how many cops they brought in. All this despite prior assurances by Tijuana's mayor that her administration would never remove migrants by force. KPBS asked Mayor Montserrat Caballero Ramirez about the camp last November. At the time, she said she had no plans to shut it down and refused to say when it might close. However, she did acknowledge feeling pressure from the United States to clear the camp because it blocked a pedestrian crossing. Giving us a fixed date, she said, would eliminate the voluntary nature of the process. City officials say the camp had become a public health hazard and that migrants were offered space in nearby shelters. The migrants and their advocates condemned the government for using so much force to evict vulnerable women and children. Gina Garibo is with American Friends Service Committee. She says using the military for this eviction fuels anti-immigrant xenophobia in Tijuana and perpetuates the idea that people in the camp are criminals. Garibo says evicting the migrants only pushes them out of the public view. It won't do anything to actually improve their condition. Gustavo Solis, KPBS News.
It's officially been 2 years since San Diego County's first exposure to COVID-19. KPBS health reporter Matt Hoffman says local attention was focused on the Marine Corps Air Station Miramar, which was drafted for a unique mission.
Do you like the park?
Yes.
Yeah. Is it better than the hospital?
Yes.
2 years ago, Frank Wusinski and his then 3-year-old daughter Annabelle were among those evacuated from Wuhan, China, and put into quarantine at MCAS Miramar.
It's a good thing that we did that, but on the other hand, you know, there's a feeling of guilt that I left my wife in probably the worst time of her life.
Wusinski's wife had to stay in China, and the 2-week quarantine, which included a hospital visit, was not easy on their daughter Annabelle.
In her mind, it's mommy not wanting to see her. Just kind of explain as simply as you can is, you know, mommy misses you, mommy loves you.
The dad and daughter were flown into San Diego on unmarked planes. Some of more than 200 Americans and their families quarantined inside of base hotel rooms. For San Diegans, it was their first local experience with coronavirus.
Well, I think most people were just confused and trying to understand, what is this all about?
Then County Supervisor's Board Chair Greg Cox says he wasn't sure what to expect.
It's one of these things you're kind of figuring, well, is this just kind of a passing problem? I mean, we had problems with swine flu, with H1N1, and those were just kind of, you know, Ebola. Those were just kind of blips on the radar screen that, okay, you know, people were kind of following what was going on, but for the most part, it never impacted their lives. And now this was something that looked like it was potentially going to be much bigger, and as it turned out, it certainly was.
If anyone got sick, they were not allowed to stay at MCAS Miramar. The county's chief medical officer, Dr. Eric McDonald, was in charge of figuring out care locally.
We knew it was a big deal because this was something that had not been done in 50 years. I mean, literally. Large-scale federal quarantine. What I remember was when we first got the call that maybe San Diego might be a location, I was like, why us? You know, and then I was trying to think of how can we get out of this, okay? But then we quickly figured out, oh no, this is where it's going to be.
McDonald ended up asking UC San Diego Health and Rady Children's Hospital to be ready if anyone felt sick. Back then, test samples had to be sent to the CDC lab in Atlanta, which took a few days for results.
Really, the heavy burden of what to do in terms of management fell on UCSD and Rady Children's to be able to figure out the infection control.
7 patients were ultimately taken to UCSD and Rady's. Of those 7 that developed symptoms, 2 tested positive. They were the 13th and 14th cases of COVID in the U.S.
You assume the worst, that is the most contagious, and you work down from there.
UC San Diego Health's Dr. Francesca Torriani helped coordinate care for the 7 patients.
You know, you could see really the worry of some of being not welcomed and of really being afraid.
Toriani says they knew it was a respiratory virus, but they were unclear how easily it could spread, so the patients were put inside special negative pressure rooms that were designed for contagious Ebola patients.
We were at the maximum containment for all of these patients.
The safety protocols worked. No staff members ended up contracting the virus, and while one patient did have an experimental treatment, everyone left the hospital okay. All of the evacuees ended up leaving the base before March came, and then we started seeing cases among local residents. There were some valuable lessons learned during the federal quarantine, like how to safely transport COVID-positive patients.
So I got our pre-hospital system kind of geared up to be able to handle that, all the way to just the logistics of how to support a lot of people in one place who were on quarantine with food, with housing, with social service support.
Toriani says for some of the patients there was a language barrier, but she was focused on making them feel welcome so far away from home.
Asking them what kind of food they want would help them, you know, giving them hot water and a teapot so that they could find some humanity. That was so touching and so important. Just to make them feel, you know, less afraid.
During the quarantine period, the San Diego community showed their support. Military spouses organized food, toy, and book donations. Some local schools even sent in Valentine's Day cards. This early COVID experience helped prepare San Diego officials when just a few weeks later, cruise ship passengers had to be quarantined, and then unsheltered residents were isolated at the convention center. Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
California solar advocates are still waiting for the governor to speak publicly about efforts to change the rules governing rooftop solar. KPBS environment reporter Eric Anderson has the details.
The California Public Utilities Commission said last week it was putting an indefinite hold on a decision to revamp the state's solar marketplace rules. A proposed decision in December called for slashing the cost of power generated by rooftop solar, applying steep monthly grid access charges, and creating a fund to help poor people get systems. The Solar Rights Alliance's Seth Rosenfeld is not encouraged by the delay.
If it's complicated to them, that makes me worried. And so our message is that everything we're doing is just going to be, let's keep doing the same thing. I mean, if they aren't hearing what the public is saying now, then we have to keep talking and we have to be louder and we have to be more persistent.
Rosenfeld wants Governor Gavin Newsom to speak out on the issue. All the governor has said publicly is that there needs to be change in the existing proposal. Eric Anderson, KPBS News.
Climate change could not only make summers hotter in California, it could leave us without air conditioning for roughly 1 week. That's the finding of a new study. It predicts more rolling blackouts and prolonged power outages when the global average temperature rises 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. That could happen by the early 2030s. If no changes are made to California's current electrical grid, researchers say we could experience about 7 days without AC every summer. The study's author says they want to highlight the practical impacts of climate change.
Our hope is that if we can show some tangible impacts to how it might affect you rather than something abstract that's off in the far future, that we might generate some more grassroots effort and try to get some policy passed to not only mitigate climate change and reduce our emissions, but also strengthen our grid.
The study's authors say a spike in heat-driven blackouts will likely result in increased mortality, especially among communities who are poorer, older, and non-white.
We're looking at some gusty Santa Ana winds to pick up again here Wednesday into Thursday of this week. Along with that, mainly offshore flow all week long, which will lead to some significant warming here, especially for the middle to later part of the work week, with no rain in sight anytime soon. Temperatures for tonight getting back down into the 40s, 40 degrees in Oceanside, 45 for you out towards Ramona, 45 in Borrego Springs, 46 tonight in El Cajon. As we head towards Tuesday, temperatures 10 to 20 degrees above average for this time of year as high pressure remains locked in here over the Great Basin, again encouraging that offshore flow there on your Tuesday. Temperatures getting up to 75 for you in San Diego, 82 in El Cajon, 77 out towards Ramona, 77 in Borrego Springs. And Wednesday, it gets even warmer. Again, the warmth is really locked in here all week long. Temperatures again 10 to 20 degrees above what is average for this time of year. And here's where we could see those Santa Ana winds really pick up here Wednesday afternoon into Thursday across Southern California. And that is going to bring the risk of elevated wildfire danger, dry conditions, again with gusty winds around 30 to 50 miles per hour. AccuWeather, the local storm max here is 75 miles per hour. Near the coast, temperatures go from the mid to upper 70s into the 80s, mid 80s by Thursday, low 80s Friday and into Saturday. Further inland, temperatures low 80s Tuesday, mid 80s Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, staying really warm, likely to last all the way through the weekend. In the mountains, temperatures here looking to stay in the mid 50s for you for the most part, maybe getting into the upper 50s there on Friday. But again, plenty of sunshine, breezy winds likely here too in the mountains. And in the desert, temperatures going from the 70s to the 80s over the next couple of days with plenty of sunshine in the forecast. For KPBS News, I'm meteorologist Jessica Pash.
A new study from the Centers for Disease Control done in California has confirmed what we know about wearing masks in public places. KPBS Sci-Tech reporter Thomas Fudge has the latest on preventing the spread of COVID-19.
The study looked at randomly selected people throughout California who had received a test result for COVID-19. Some tested positive, some negative. The bottom line, always using a face mask or a respirator in an indoor public setting gave you lower odds of a positive test result compared with never wearing protection in those settings. Dr. Francesca Toriani is an infectious disease specialist at UC San Diego. She says the study was a real-world assessment of the risk to people inside public places.
If you are going into an environment where you don't know what the ventilation is, right? And what the concentration on people who are infected is and may not be wearing a mask, then this is demonstration that there is this additional protection that I can take to protect myself.
Toriani points out the CDC study was done pre-Omicron.
And so we can just imagine that the protection of masking and of KN95s and N95s would even be higher with Omicron.
Updates about mask protection from the CDC tell us loosely woven masks provide the least protection. Layered, finely woven products are better. Well-fitting respirators, such as the N95 mask, offer the highest protection. How much longer will we need to wear masks? Toriani says with high-risk areas like airplanes, mass transit, and healthcare settings, the requirements will continue.
But in our everyday life, hopefully, if we reach better coverage of vaccination and if our numbers go down in society, then at that point, I think we'll be able to at least relax some of those requirements.
The CDC study examined just over 1,800 Californians. Thomas Fudge, KPBS News.
I'm Judy Woodruff. Tonight on the NewsHour, President Biden and Germany's Chancellor pledge a united front to counter Russian aggression against Ukraine. Coming up at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
Gas prices in San Diego County are the highest they've been in nearly a decade. The average price of a gallon of regular gasoline is $4.67. That's up 5.5 cents from just a week ago and $1.20 more than it was 1 year ago. AAA attributes the price hike to higher oil prices and refineries beginning to ship summer blend gasoline, which is more expensive to produce. The city of San Diego is considering a new law to regulate street vendors. KPBS Speak City Heights reporter Jacob Ayer explains the proposal and why immigration advocates are worried.
San Diego's proposal would set new limits on street vendors, from where they can operate to the months they can do business. It includes limits to street vending in some communities during summer months and year-round in certain parts of popular tourist areas, like the Gaslamp Quarter. Dulce Garcia is the executive director of the nonprofit organization Border Angels. She says many immigrant families survived the pandemic by turning to street vending.
So for us, this is an issue that we know disproportionately impacts Black and Brown communities, and even more vulnerable within that subsection is our undocumented community. So for us, street vending is a matter of economic equality, of equity for these people.
Gloria Robles is a street vendor who works in City Heights. She's lived in San Diego for over 2 decades, but turned to street vending in 2019. She says on Saturdays and Sundays, we go to the farmers market to recover a little money because the pandemic has affected it a lot. So we want to continue where we can. While some brick-and-mortar merchants are concerned about the proliferation of street vendors, Garcia says they have a different clientele, and she says the language being used to justify the removal of street vendors is problematic.
We hear that they are afraid of the competition, but the people that go to these very expensive restaurants are not the same people that are buying from the hot dog stands, from the tamales ladies. So it's a different market. It really isn't competition.
The proposed legislation will be discussed on Wednesday by the City Council's Economic Development Committee. If approved, it will go before the full council on March 1st. Jacob Ayer, KPBS News.
You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Good night.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, proud to support the mission of KPBS and privileged to serve San Diego clients. Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, helping homeowners maintain drain, heating, and cooling systems since 1978. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.